Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back. It is your host, Cesar Espino at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Ashley Kerby. Hey, Ashley, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you for being on the show. Before we get started, let me just give the listeners and viewers a quick overview of who you are. And then we definitely dive into, really who you are, right?
Yes.
So Ashley is a Jesus lover, business owner, fitness coach. Her purpose in life is in speaking her truth into people's lives that moves them to a positive change. And, and we'll leave it at that because she has a really good message, a really good story that I think as you listen through that, you're going to be able to reflect and maybe perhaps it's not necessarily you. There's certain things though that I think might definitely resonate with you regardless of your background, right? So Ashley, why don't we just start off by, telling our listeners a little bit more about you. What's your background? Where did you come from? Where were you born?
Yes, sir. So I was born here in Michigan, in Lansing, Michigan. But what's most interesting about my early childhood and where that stemmed from, when I was an infant, I was put into foster care. Almost immediately. Long story, but birth mom was 16 years old, couldn't provide for me, couldn't provide for herself. When you think about it, she was a child herself.
Yeah.
And she just didn't have the support to take care of an infant. So I actually spent the first 5 years of my life in the foster care system.
Wow.
And when I was 3 years old, here's the really interesting thing. I was adopted. I was adopted by a family, which is fantastic. But there's something that happens in children's minds when they're infants and they don't form those secure attachments to caregivers. There's something that happens to us on a subconscious level where we're not able to bond properly all the time with people who should be our caregivers, right? So what happened when I was in this family and was adopted by them, I couldn't bond with the mom and with the dad because psychologically, like my brain just didn't allow it to happen. So I was actually put back into foster care when I was 5 years old. And it caused a major disruption. And now that I'm, 28 years old, I can look back on it and I'm like, okay, I understand what was going on. I understand what my brain was doing and how it was kind of protecting me from forming bonds. But it really, it impacted me for the rest of my life. Like I still, until this day, I'm dealing with the repercussions of spending that time in foster care. Wow. And it really became a block for me to be able to form healthy attachments to anybody because I couldn't acknowledge what an unconditional love looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that with that experience, like you said, you're kind of living that now because of what you went through in as a early childhood, right?
Yes, exactly. Like there's still things that I'm working through because of the impact that had on my early childhood. And when that really came to head was not until I reached college age. I didn't recognize that my brain was still dealing with the trauma of what happened when I was younger and the way that it continued to impact. So I was readopted. I was adopted by another family. But there still was those blocks there that didn't allow me to form attachment. It's almost as if like your brain is trying to prove the point that everybody's going to leave. So here, why don't you act out the most that you can so you can prove that they're never going to stay and you're never going to be good enough. So my brain was rewriting this narrative my entire life of, you're not good enough, you're not worth it, so here I'm going to prove it to you and you're going to keep messing up. And it really came to a head when I was in college. So I'm 28 now. So you picture, this was 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I go to university, I'm on a full ride academic scholarship. I'm in theater, I'm in public speaking, I'm doing everything quote unquote right. Mm-hmm. Until I start dealing with my past. And by dealing, I mean very much not dealing with my past.
Yeah.
I ended up in several relationships and I started looking for my self-worth within those relationships. A lot of unhealthy attachments to where I was like, if I can just prove that I can get somebody to love me, then it will validate my self-worth and who I am. And what this culminated into, Cesar, not to make a long sob story, because like I said, this is 10 years ago, but what it culminated into was I was in and out of sexual relationships. I was doing drugs all the time. Every single party drug that you can think of. And what I was pursuing at that time was that high. Right? That I'm going to stay up here. I'm not going to deal with like the stuff from my past. I'm going to stay up here. So while I'm doing all of this stuff to the chemicals inside my brain, I'm also trying to reconcile what does love look like in my sexual relationships. And it ended up that I kind of destroyed my life at that point. Between the drugs, between the relationships, between the anxiety and the depression that started coming in because I was messing with my brain chemicals at that point. My senior year of college, I was evicted. I dropped out of, I didn't go to my final exams of my first semester, which if you would have known me 4 years prior to that, I was straight A student. I mean, I was there on an academic scholarship. So I got to the point where I didn't even go to my final exams because I was having anxiety attacks all the time, going through a really rough breakup. And it wasn't until somebody, a friend of mine actually looked at me and he's like, Ashley, do you recognize that you are always the victim in your stories? And I was so offended. I was like, listen up. I'm the one going through a breakup right now. This person is doing A, B, C, D to me. And at that time in my acting career, I was also playing multiple roles where I was dealing with my past. So I was talking a lot about foster care. I was talking a lot about reconciling what does it look like to be unadopted and what that did to my psyche. And just so I was dealing with all of this emotion, and I literally, like I said, evicted, dropped out of school the semester before I was going to graduate. I was partying almost every single night. I was stealing money from friends because I was trying to chase the high and find more drugs. And so I'm not proud of that person that I was at that time whatsoever. And it wasn't actually until about 9 months later that I got pregnant.
Yeah. And I gotta tell you though, even with the fact that obviously it's good to recognize that you're not proud of that past, yet that past, again, I always look at the past as a lesson and an educational event in your life. And if you learn from that and you improve upon that, then you can definitely create a better future for yourself. A lot of people get hung up on the past and continue to live in the past. And so you ended up doing that. I want to go back to that in a second though. And before that though, going back to your childhood, right? One thing that maybe a lot of people don't understand or don't see it, and why so if you're an adult and you have even kids, at an early age, the way our brain works, number one, our brain is always looking for that safety net, which is what happened to you, right? When your biological mother ended up giving you for adoption, your brain said, okay, safety, they're always going to leave you, so let me protect you somehow in one shape or form, which obviously it was doing not the right thing for you because you created this mechanism and built up this wall where you know what, this foster home is not going to be good for me, that one's not going to be good for me, and you keep jumping back and forth. The second thing is between the ages of 0 and 7, right? From the time that you're born to 7 years old, the brain is composed of the conscious and the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind in those first 7 years are the more critical years of your life, because what happens in those 7 years are going to follow you all the way through unless you work on yourself, which is what you're doing.
Exactly. I could not have said it better. And I think that's why I was trying to talk about, and it's something I work with my clients on now, is discovering what are the patterns and habits that your subconscious has, and what are the values that your subconscious is always trying to get back to. I know for me that stability and security is so important because of the fact of where I came from. So I know that will always be one of my values. And so it's kind of working with my brain to figure out, okay, if I know my brain's always going to try to get back to this point, how do I create healthy pathways for my brain to feel secure and to feel stable? And what you just said about those first 7 years of your life, if you don't have that security net programmed on your unconscious, you're going to end up acting out in your adult life and have no idea why. If you've never explored it,
right,
you might be reacting in your romantic relationships, your friendships, your business. You might be making decisions that are off of reaction in your subconscious rather than a rational thought process. And this is something I really had to analyze about myself, of what is emotional response and is instinct, and what is true and what is logical. And so reconciling that has been a journey over the past 6 years. And honestly, it didn't start changing until I had my child. And I think that the biggest reason why it started changing at the point is suddenly I could recognize what unconditional love was. I was only 24 and I was pregnant. And I was in a relationship with an alcoholic at that time, which if you have somebody with me with the trauma in the past and you try to go get together with an alcoholic, that's just a lot of codependency waiting to happen.
Right. Yeah.
So it was just crazy time.
Yeah, no, and I can only imagine, right? I mean, even going back to what you just mentioned, like the fact that, your daughter is it a daughter or a son?
It's a daughter. Yep.
Your daughter. Okay. So your daughter, obviously when she was, you got pregnant, she was born, that became a different point in your life where, again, you found that love and you found that true meaning of that. And it's interesting to know how, again, even growing up, and because we were moving around from one foster to another, a lot of times you see that as that being the norm. That's the norm for me. And therefore you didn't find that, like you said, that self-love, that self-worthiness, and you got into relationships, and you got into drugs, and you got into drinking and sex relationships, all this stuff, because you were looking for that acceptance that you never had. And,
exactly.
And it's crazy because a lot of people nowadays, sometimes without even thinking about it, they're doing these things on the subconscious level, because they're looking for acceptance, they're looking for unity, they're looking for something that is keeping them moving forward. In your case, it was all the bad things that you came to realize when you got pregnant.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I think too, what happened when I had my daughter is it couldn't all be about me anymore. Because the focus was shifted to her and what was for her best, I actually moved from this sense of victimhood back into my sense of power and control. Because I truly believe that up until that point, I was living with my identity as a victim. All of these bad things happened to me, and I've never been able to reconcile them. Like, this is one of the stories and the narratives that I was telling myself in my head, along with like the fact of like, you're unlovable, you're not worthy. All of this was culminating. And it wasn't until I realized that I actually have a power, a sense of personal power and control over my life. I cannot control the past. I can never go backwards. I can never control what other people did to me. But here I have this little life in my hands, and it's up to me to either step up, be there for her, and figure out my stuff so I can focus on her, or she's going to end up in the same predicament that I was at. She can't have a mom that's out here on drugs all the time and a dad that's also an alcoholic and end up in the foster care system. There was no way that I was going to allow that to happen. So it kind of forced me to move from my victimhood into what I call like victoryhood.
Yeah,
and now
awesome.
A victor in my life rather than a victim.
Yeah.
And it was still a process, and it still is.
Right.
actually,
Yeah.
to get outside of that.
Right. And I was going to say, I mean, I believe, I've been going through my own journey of what I consider to be my own self-development. And I feel that it's never an ending story. You're never going to end. You're always going to be able to become better. And my one thing I think was Les Brown talks about this, and it's like, there's no perfection, right? You can only get better every day. And if you have perfection, then once you feel like, quote unquote, you reach that point, then what is there more for you to do? Right. And so for you to continue in this journey called life, you got to continue to keep pushing yourself forward. And so I believe that there's never going to be, in anything that you do, that perfect moment or a relationship or anything like that. You got to continue to work on yourself. So for me, it has been continuously a growth when it comes down to personal development in any different aspects, which is kind of what you're going through. You're still working through that. And it's not because you're bad or you're not where you need to be. It's more so because you have to continue to do that as part of your journey, right?
Exactly. And I think that's a really important distinction that you just made. And it's where we get the growth mindset from, right? Acknowledging the fact. And I think my faith helps me a lot with that, because within my faith that Jesus is the only perfect being. And it almost takes off of me the need to be perfect, because I can acknowledge the fact that, hey, I'm never going to be there. So instead, I'm just doing the best that I can every day. And also, I'm worthy where I'm at. So that's the big thing that I think has shifted it in my head, is I no longer feel like I have to prove that I'm worthy of love. I don't have to prove that I'm worthy of acceptance. I just acknowledge the fact that because I am a creation and because I am here, I am worthy of love. I'm worthy of acceptance. And like you just said, there's no perfection. I'm never going to get there. There's always going to be another place to be at. So if you can learn to love yourself within the process and with the journey, then you can shift every single avenue of your life, whether it's business, finance. For me, it's bodybuilding. Bodybuilding, I think, is and that's the other thing that happened is after I had my daughter, I found fitness. I started working with a trainer, and what I noticed happening more so than anything else, it wasn't the physical transformation that I was extremely proud of. It's what started happening within my psyche, because with muscle building, you either show up to the gym, you do your workout, you eat your food, and the results happen, or you don't. And it's all perfectly within your control, right? It's all either you do the thing or you don't do the thing, and you get a result. And it put me again back into the driver's seat of, I am responsible for the trajectory of my life. Yeah, and it was through that experience of bodybuilding that I left the relationship that I was in. I recognized how toxic that it was, even though it was her dad. I was like, this is not going anywhere, and this is not going to elevate her to her highest being either, or help her on her journey. So I love fitness so much because of how the mind and body are so intricately connected. Yeah. And that's one thing that I really work with my clients. I'm like, it's not just about losing weight. It is about like, when you move your body this certain way, it can calm your anxiety down. When you move your body and you start recognizing the control you have, you can recognize that you can control the thoughts and your response to certain situations. So a lot of my programs that I give my clients is about building control back into their life and having them recognize their own sense of empowerment. And it's this really weird mix, Cesar, I'll tell you, of mindset development. Yeah. And nutrition and the body, and trying to teach people that like all three of those go together. So, and I love it. I love seeing the change people go through. I actually have a client who I worked with her for 1.5 years before I left my place of work, and she's running for Congress now. So, I mean, I see like from her where she started at to where her self-confidence is at now, and her belief in what she's capable of, that I'm like, and she's told me, she's like, that there's part of that that comes from what you and I built together. And she's like, your belief in me and building that belief in myself has allowed me to, in every avenue of my life, just explode. And that's, I mean, I could go on and on about it all day.
No, yeah, but I love that. I really love that. And I want to get to that because, get back to it, because I think I've learned a lot of stuff, not only just based on this conversation. I had all the conversations with other people that are in fitness, and just really open up, for me, definitely open up my eyes in a different aspect. I wanted to ask you though, because I'm curious to know. So when you got pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm assuming, and you kind of mentioned that. I just want to see exactly how that played out in your mind at that time. Is that, was there ever a point where you said, I cannot give my daughter the same life that I had? Yet, what was the whole reason for you to be able to shift that, besides that feeling that self-love? Because I'm just curious to say, well, I can accept the circumstances, I can accept the relationship that I'm in right now, which is toxic. It is what it is, kind of thing. Like, I'm not saying that your biological mother went through that. I said there's some people that do go through that, and they're like, what,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. I'm just gonna accept this. What was going through your mind to say, no, I'm not gonna do that, and I'm gonna make this freaking change?
Well, to be very honest with you, about 2 months into my pregnancy, the gentleman that I was dating, he was actually one of my best friends, and we had another friend that we were really close to, and we had
Mm-hmm.
asked him to be the godfather. And what made the three of us so close is we all dealt with similar issues of like depression
Mm-hmm.
and similar issues of not feeling good enough, and it manifested in different ways for the three of us. But 2 months um, into that, my best friend passed.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some situations around how he passed that I recognize the fact that if I were to continue down this road, that the same thing could happen to me.
Yeah.
And it just really made a little click in my head of this can't happen to me. And if this does happen to me, who's going to take care of this baby? And it was just like that idea. I think a lot of times that I think about my daughter, and I don't place who I was as a child onto her, but I see her and I almost see a younger me. And when I was pregnant with her, and when I found out that I was going to have a little girl, I was just thinking about who I was and what I needed when I was a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And to think about her heart hurting and thinking that like nobody wanted her, or that I didn't want her to go through the same habits. Like that was a big change, like seeing where I had ended up and where some of my best friends were ending up. I was like, I don't want that trajectory for her. I don't want her to ever question, was I good enough? Why wasn't I good enough? Why doesn't anybody love me? Like that was a really, those were thoughts that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
I didn't want her to go through that.
Yeah.
And I think that culminating with my best friend's death at that time was really, it shook me to my core.
Right.
And I'll be honest with you, I stayed in the relationship with her father for another year. Even though it was abusive, even though it was extremely unhealthy. Actually, my fiance now has asked me before, why did you stay? Why did you stay in that relationship for that long? And I think there was still part of me that was just trying to prove, if I save this person, then it validates my self-worth. But what ended up happening is my purpose being my daughter's mom was greater than my purpose needing to save this person from their demons, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that, like what I just said, that purpose, in the self-development world, they always talk about your why, right?
Yeah,
They're
right,
always
yeah.
talking about your why's got to be greater.
Yeah.
And when I saw her, God bless me. He knew what I needed, and not wanting her to experience the same thing that I went through was so important to me that it moved me to make change. It moved me to say, because at that point in my life, I had messed up about as far as I thought I could go. Like, yeah. I didn't know. I was a college dropout. I wasn't on speaking terms with a lot of my family at that time. I'd shut everybody out. That just contributed to me feeling even worse about who I was. I think she gave me a purpose.
Yeah.
She was the first step in giving me a purpose. And then, from there, it's just kind of built and built, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. It does make a lot of sense. And I can tell you, like there's certain things that, that you mentioned that kind of relate to me. because I went through something similar in the sense of, not wanting somebody to go through the same struggles and challenges that I went through. I mean, I had a kid at 16. And so, my story is a little bit, different than that. Yet the thing is that I grew up with not having anything. And so I said to myself, like, now I have somebody that I have to look after, and I cannot allow her to go through the same things that I went through, and I got to be able to provide. And so it's like, I got to either shape up or whatever the case may be. Right.
Exactly.
And so I think that's what happened with you, which is awesome. The other thing too, is that, I was actually just doing a video on this, which is your life purpose, and I feel my philosophy is that we are here in this earth for a bigger purpose than ours, than ourselves. We're here to be able to provide something much greater, right? And I say this, which I hope people can relate to this, is that that if you're listening to this, or you woke up this morning, you're breathing, God is not yet done with you. He still has a purpose for you to complete, to go out and do that, or whatever you believe in, whether it's God or the universe, it doesn't matter. My point is, that greater power is not done with you. And so let's not waste that. Don't just be a time traveler in this earth. Create something for yourself. Create something for somebody that you love. In your case, it was your daughter. That was, at that point, that was your purpose, right? You were doing that. And so I really love that. Now, getting back to fitness, I've learned something which is kind of cool. I've been talking to several different people that I've interviewed that are fitness coach, and in terms of that, and they're kind of all giving me and telling me the same thing. It's not just about fitness. It's not just about getting these muscles and being, and working out. Is beyond that. Is more about the mind. Certain people talk about it's more about the mind. It's about working and really changing the way you see the world in a different lens, right? And I really enjoy that. So I want to know more about that, because I know obviously people think, well, I'm going to go to the gym and just lift weights and things like that. Yet this is not, it's not exactly what you do. I mean, yeah, you help people get, good results and a healthy diet, yet is beyond that. And before I let you speak, one thing that I also say is that, just like you want to have a good body and you're going to feed your body with good ingredients and eat healthy, you got to do the same thing with your mind. You have to, work that muscle, and you have to feed your brain, your mind, with the right type of programs, with the right type of ingredients, get rid of all the negativity, the way you talk to yourself, the way you talk to the people, all of that good stuff. So anyways, please.
Yes. No, I'm over here just smiling and grinning, because I'm like, yes, yes, yes. You do have to work out your brain. It's as important working out your biceps, your glutes, your legs, whatever is important to you in your physique. The mind, they all go together. This is the incredible thing. How you fuel yourself affects your gut and your hormones, and the hormones that get sent to your brain. And so your brain is affected directly by the foods that you eat, and it affects your emotions. And so I work with a lot of moms, right? That's like my specialty. I love working with moms because I am a mom. I love working with women because I think that women, a little bit more, so men deal with this too, but women a little bit more so deal with the ideas of not being good enough, not feeling worthy. The way that they talk to themselves about their body is really harsh. And so they end up in these cycles of like, I'm going to get fit and I'm going to do this. And then they go on these dramatic weight loss journeys, and then they fall off, and then they guilt themselves, and it becomes this cycle, right? And so my program is focused on, we need to figure out what drives you. Figure out what your brain responds to. Once we figure that out, and we figure out what are the obstacles, the emergency brakes that your brain also likes to pull to get you back. So like for me, security, stability, most important things in my life. So when I go to make some changes, my brain likes to throw that emergency brake, because I'm not residing in that safe, secure place anymore. I'm about to make a leap, right? So I'll do a lot of like self-sabotaging types of things where my brain will just make up excuses. And so what I try to work with my clients is, all right, let's figure out what drives you. Then let's figure out how your brain is trying to work against you, so that we can flip it and start having your brain work for you. and start filling your head with the right stories. I do believe that we all tell ourselves certain stories about who we are, where we came from. And the crazy thing is we're actually in charge of those stories. Mm-hmm. So if we just start flipping a little bit from, let's just say, I'm a foster care kid. I've been told my whole life I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to drop out here. So I can either choose to believe that story and say, yeah, this is who I am. Like you said, just accept it. Or I can choose my story and say, I am actually in charge of my future. I have the capability to become way more and become way beyond what my circumstances were. And fitness is very similar to that. And so I work to like kind of break with my clients so that they can see the results that are self-sustaining. And then they can take that beyond fitness and start putting it into other avenues of their life. I just know that when I started working on myself physically, how I leveled up mentally was tremendous. I mean, I think it was about a year, Caesar. It was about a year that I went from just having my child in this relationship with this alcoholic, not having many prospects. Maybe I was going to go back to college, to all of a sudden I'm getting my personal training certification. I'm training for a bodybuilding show. I got a job in a great gym, and I learned so much about training. And now, let's see how old it is, 3 years later, I own my own studio. I'm in charge of helping other people level themselves up. So it's just incredible how as soon as I started working on the physical, the mental became part of that. And as soon as I started focusing on the mental, I leveled up even more. And I also got saved at that time. And so that started working to heal a lot in my heart. So again, whether you believe in God or the universe, what you just said about God's not done with you yet, I believe that whether you believe in God or not, God uses broken stories to do more work in the world than he ever does a perfect life. He can't do anything with a perfect life. But when you recognize that, hey, this person was broken too, and look what they did, and look at where they came from, it gives you a sense of, if they can do it, I can do it also.
Yeah. And I love what you mentioned is you have the choice to choose which way you're going to go and how are you going to talk about your life story or who you were in the past or whatever the case may be. And the other thing too is changing that frame. You just, instead of, being the victim, like you said, become the victor and change the frame of that, right? A lot of people get hung up on this, an NLP. I'm also an NLP coach. So they get hung up on this triangle, which is the drama cycle where you're either the victim, you're the perpetrator, or you're the rescuer, rescuing somebody. Like in your case, you said, I must stay in this 1 year relationship to rescue this person that's toxic, where you were just rescuing them. At the same time, you were also the victim because you were in that relationship and you were the perpetrator. When you step out of that triangle and say, you know what, I'm not going to be any of those. I'm going to take full control of my life and I'm going to change the frame of my trajectory. Man, things are going to change for you in many different possible ways that you didn't even imagine, which it did for you,
Exactly.
Awesome. I love what you said too. Is like this year, one thing that you do, you help women shed the weight of their anxiety. You're not, and let's go back to this. And I love how that's put, yes, you're helping them with their physical being, losing pounds and things like that. That's not really, it is part of it. Yet the real thing is you're helping them lose the weight of their anxiety, depression, and other mental barriers that are getting to them of becoming the person they need to be and getting the bodies they need to have. That's crazy. That's amazing.
Yes. Because I do believe that they're so intricately connected, the way that the brain and the body work together. And when I stumbled upon this idea in myself, when I noticed that I could start controlling my depressive states and my anxiety states by focusing on how I was moving my body and focusing on, and I also have studied some NLP and focused a lot on like state changes and even like, the muscles in your face, how you smile, and what it releases within your hormones versus your state of remaining slumped over. And so when you move your body, when you physically move your body into a different state, you release hormones into your head, into your body, that will move you out of some depressive states. And I really believe that anxiety and depression are at an all-time high. I had this conversation with somebody. They're like, no, I just think it's more talked about nowadays. I was like, no, I really think it's higher than it's ever been, because people are moving less. We are eating more hormone-filled food that messes with our natural chemical balance. And we live in a state of a lot of comparison and a lot of looking at other people and saying, oh, well, I don't have that, so what's wrong with me? And so the way that we talk to ourselves inside our head has also changed from the days and times of being hunters and gatherers and being outside all the time, right? And so when I recognized that, I was like, all right, this is a thing that even younger generations are dealing with more and more. But then there's this one thing I noticed, that some people were reveling in that identity. And I don't want to say that they enjoyed having anxiety or depression, but I figured out that people were taking that on as part of their identity of, oh, I have anxiety. So everything was always going back to their anxiety. I hesitate to say this because I truly do believe that doctors and therapists are there for a reason. Medication is there for a reason. If you're struggling with severe depression, clinical depression, or severe anxiety disorders, you should definitely seek out a professional and do whatever you can to be on your treatment plan. But for the general public who are dealing with general just anxiety and depression within our states, a lot of that can be altered by working on your mindset, working on how you feel yourself, and working on, because you're not only going to shift how you feel inside your body, you're going to shift how you think about your body. You're going to shift how you think about yourself and the power that you have to make change within your life. So again, it's moving from I'm a victim of my anxiety to I am a victor. I happen to deal with this anxiety, but it does not define me, and I don't take it on as my identity.
Yeah, no, I love that. I really, really love that. You know, it's what is happening to you, or you think is happening to you, or what other people might think of you, it cannot define your true purpose, right? You have the ability to change that.
Yes.
You have the ability to make that change, which is awesome. I love something that you mentioned here. And you said, our mind is the toughest battleground. In order to see the change in any area of our life, we have to exercise our mental strength along with our bodies. Once you're able to make the shift to knowing you can't control everything, but can control perspective, your actions, you move out of your victim mindset and into a victor mindset. I love that. Can you elaborate more on that? I know you've been giving us a lot more of that for sure.
Yes. I'm going to tie in a little bit of what we were just talking about with identity along with the answer to this question. Because again, you can't control environment and you can't control other people, but we can be in control and filtering our thoughts and the negative and the positive that like to mess around. I always say, I was like, the mind is Satan's battleground. He just goes in there and is like, all right, let's see what I can kind of jack up in here. That's how I feel. Right. And so let me tie this into a little piece about identity. After I spent my early childhood in foster care, I was diagnosed with an attachment disorder called reactive attachment disorder. And basically it's like I told you, because I'm afraid of those healthy bounds with primary caregivers, I will do whatever I can to push them away, right? And so a lot of my behavior issues were defined as being, it's called RAD. They were defined as being, well, she's just RAD, so this is the way that she acts. She just has this attachment disorder. And I started to believe it about myself. I was labeled as, and I love my parents, but a lot of they went to a lot of support groups for RAD kids. And the way that they would talk about me was she has RAD. This is her. And so I started getting it inside my head that I was never going to have healthy attachments because I'm a RAD kid. This is just what I do, right? No. And so what's been so amazing, especially after I had my daughter, and once I got rid of that thought in my head that I am a RAD kid, when I started to get rid of that thought of, no, I'm not a RAD kid. I'm not defined by this attachment disorder. It's something that I have dealt with. But of course, I'm going to have healthy relationships in my life. And in fact, the man that I'm engaged to now, this is the healthiest relationship that I have ever been in.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an amazing family together. But it started with, I had to start fighting against the labels that other people had put on me. So again, you think back to like, all right, bad foster kid, going nowhere, going to drop out of school and get pregnant, or rad kid, they're always going to be in trouble. I did almost go to juvie at one point in my life. Like that did almost happen. Yeah. But when I started to shake off that label and rewire my thoughts of, I am actually a loving, caring person. I do have some red flags that are raised with trust issues, but I am a loving, caring person. And of course I'm able to develop those bonds. So this is what I mean about taking ownership over the way that we think about ourselves and our life, even if our environment or the people within our environment try to put something else on us. We can't control what people think. We're never going to be able to. Mm-hmm. And we can't control, like for instance, right now, none of us can control a global pandemic. The only thing we have power over is our perspective. So how we think about something, and then the actions that we take based off of those thoughts.
Yeah.
So, and I think that ties in with fitness a lot. I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, so what are you thinking right before you decide not to do your workout? Or what are you thinking right before you decide that you want to go off track with your meal? That's okay if you do, but what is the thought process behind it? Are you thinking, oh, I'm already A, B, C, and D, so I might as well just eat this donut anyways? Or are you thinking, you know what, I've worked hard this week, I want to enjoy this donut, here we go.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Subtle little shifts, but as soon as you start, and I think we do have the power to define ourselves. I think we have the power to determine who are we going to be. And I have a group that I'm in, and there's a life coach in there, and he has been doing just free coaching for this group during this time of the pandemic. And he said something that struck me. He said, who do you want to be? And why don't you live your life like that person rather than live your life as the person you are now? If you were yourself 5 years from now, what are the things that you would do?
Right.
And I've been coaching people for 3 years now, and I was so struck by that because I was like, yes, why am I waiting for my future to be this person when this person is going to be created out of what I do today? Right. So if you have a goal of, I'm going to be this fit, active person. Okay, so what would that fit, active person do with their lifestyle? And let's do that today.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And I can probably summarize some of the things that you mentioned with, there's this African proverb that says, when there's no enemy within, the enemy outside cannot do you no harm, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about right now. It's like, it really comes down to, the things that are going inside your head. When you can learn how to control those things, when you can learn how to speak to yourself. You were talking about projecting words that are coming out. I am, this or that. Instead of saying I am negative stuff, I am positive things, right? So when you start controlling those things, then you start really creating, again, the person you want to be in the near future today. Yes. Right? So that's really amazing. Ashley, I really enjoy all of this conversation. So I have a couple of more questions for you before I let you go. The first one is, if people wanted to work with you, do you work with them on a one-on-one basis? How is your program work? How does that work?
So my initial program is a 12-week program where I work with people within a group, and we start with the brain. And then we are doing workouts throughout the week. We do virtual training, but that's where you get the meat of the work to start uncovering what's holding you back and what is also propelling you forward. So that program is like your base. From there, I do work with people one-on-one also. I work with people one-on-one virtually, in person, but that program is really designed around helping people to shed the mental barriers that are keeping them from get their results. From there, we can kind of go in more one-on-one and doing one-on-one coaching and one-on-one training, because at that point, you will have done a lot of the mental work yourself. So that's the main reason. And I actually discovered that I love virtual training. Because of the fact that I love working with people from all over the world, not just people that are in my immediate vicinity. So that's one thing, like, talk about perspective. I was like, I'm almost thankful
Yeah.
Not that this virus has happened, but that I have had the experience of working with people virtually because it has changed where I want to take my program.
Right.
So that's been incredible. Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then I know you've given us a lot of great tips and nuggets and a lot of great information. If there was one thing you can tell the listeners and viewers of what they can do today to overcome anything in their life, what would that be?
You got to move from your victimhood.
Mm.
So where your story's at, and if you look at where you've come from and what maybe has happened to you, or what you're dealing with currently, you got to shake off the stuff that you can't control, and you got to start focusing on what you can control. And the first thing is your perspective. And then the second thing are your daily actions. Okay, so what are your daily actions that are going to get you where you want to go? If you shut out all the rest, you shut out all the other people, you shut out everything from your past. And like I said, your past can be used to build you. You said this too, Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
Your past can be used to help move change into other people's lives. But first, you have to shake off your victimhood and you have to move to your sense of victorship. And once you're there, you're back into the driver's seat and you would be amazed what you're capable of.
Yeah. Talking about habits, maybe can you share some of the daily habits that you do every day that help you be in a positive state of mind?
Well, prayer is really important to me. But if you're not of Christian faith, or a faith that requires prayer, spending time focused on your gratitude, and you hear it all the time in the self-development world. But the thing about gratitude and spending time focusing on what you're thankful for, it's just a perspective shift. It's stop focusing on everything that's wrong in your life. Stop focusing on everything that you think is wrong in the world, be it politics, or the way that in our state the governor is handling the pandemic. It's a really big thing people are up in arms about. And I'm sitting here thinking, you can't control that. But what are you thankful for? I'm super thankful for the time I've gotten to spend with my fiance during this time. We've gotten more one-on-one time, learning, growing, praying together. Like, that's been extremely important to me. The other thing is I try to move my body in some way every single day. So be that strength training, be a HIIT workout. I have to get that in, because what I note for me, depression starts to sink in. When I'm not actively moving my body, my energy is lower. I don't have as much control over the way that my brain is thinking, because my happy hormones aren't as high. So I always move my body. I always have some sense of gratitude and prayer for myself. And water intake is like, people ask me, like, Ashley, where do I start to be fit? Get your water intake up. Your body's 80% water and you're walking around like a dehydrated zombie. I was like, we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
I was like, but as soon as you get your water intake up, you'll notice that your energy just, boom, it explodes. So those are the three things that like are very important in my life.
Yeah.
And then I always take a nap every day too.
Okay.
I know that's super weird.
Yeah.
But the way that my energy throughout the day goes, like, probably after we're done here, Caesar, I'm probably going to go take a nap. My mid-afternoon, I get a little crash. So I take a nap. Yeah. And I wake up ready for the rest of the day.
Your power nap. That's awesome. No, that's good. Yes. That's good. So Ashley, I really had a great time having you on the show and really getting a lot of information from you and ideas and, going over your life lessons, which is pretty awesome. If people wanted to connect with you, where can they find you to connect with you?
Honestly, Facebook is going to be the best place, the absolute best place. I do most of my conversations and I work within a lot of Facebook groups on there. So you can look me up, Ashley Kerby, or if you go to www.shiftfitnesscoaching.com, you can find me there too. But I'm all about having personal conversations. So when people reach out to me on Facebook, it's my favorite way. I'm like, all right, let's hop on a call.
Yeah, definitely. And no, don't worry, guys. I'll have all of this information for you guys in the comments below, so you guys can definitely find her and connect with her. So, Ashley, any last thoughts you want to leave us with before I let you go?
I think I've said it all, Caesar. Just staying in control of your perspective and staying in control of your mind will do a world of difference in getting you where you want to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And for the rest of you guys, please do me a favor. Make sure that you like, share, comment, subscribe on this episode. Check out the last past interviews and the upcoming interviews. Definitely stay tuned, and I'll see you guys at the next episode. Bye.
Do you feel stuck? Do you feel like life is against you? Do you feel like you can't get ahead? Well, we have a podcast for you. You can overcome anything with Cesar Espino, real estate investor and real estate coach, NLP practitioner, and author of the book of the same name. Cesar will show you a way to overcome anything in your life through talking with people from all walks of life that have done just that. You Can Overcome Anything podcast available on Spreaker.com.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you tuned in to this podcast. You can find me at Spreaker.com, where you can like and subscribe. And to learn more about myself and my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at Facebook under Cesar R. Espino. Once again, thanks for joining me. I am looking forward to having you at the next episode, and know that you truly can overcome anything.